Fighting crime. It's a noble act. And you can fight crime too. Next time you see someone masturbating in a public park, you confront them. You tell them what's what. I wouldn't stand in front of them though. You have no idea how close they are to coughing up the yop or reaching their vinegar strokes. Oh, and also check it's not me first. Anyway, I remember being very excited when I saw Crime Fighters. I was a huge scrolling beat-em-up fan at the time, thanks to the twin fisty guns of Techno's Double Dragon and Ocean's amazing Spectrum conversion of Renegade. I don't love Renegade quite as much as David Birdsall, as you can see in the link above, but I am very keen on it. I suspect that I would give it a bit of heavy petting in a bus stop after 4 cans of Foster's, if I was a classy 17-year-old still, but I wouldn't marry it or anything. Now, when I saw Crime Fighters, it reminded me of the most galling bit of Double Dragon. In Double Dragon, you can pick up the weapons that all the enemy characters try and twat you about the head with. All you had to do was apply knuckle to chops to relieve these bully boys of their tools of naughtiness, and lo! Time to mistake a skull for a baseball. Now, the only weapon you couldn't pick up in Double Dragon was, of course, the machine gun of the charmingly named final boss, Willy. Yes, beating up your brother for the favour of Marion was an interesting if slightly disturbing twist. But how cool would it have been to turn a gun on that weird, evil Phil Collins impersonator at the end of that game? It was seeing Crime Fighters in action that piqued my interest. The game featured hoodlums with pistols that you can relieve the gang members of and turn the gun back on them. It's a minor part of the game, but it's what got my eyes on it. You couldn't do that in Double Dragon, in Final Fight, or in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Speaking of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles if you prefer, and if you do prefer that, you're a big old fan of bizarre late 80s British censorship. Anyway, talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it was another scrolling beat-em-up that came out in exactly the same year of 1989, and by the same team, those guys at Konami. Is Crime Fighters as good as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? No. The atmosphere, for instance, is suitably dystopian 80s beat-em-up, smothered in graffiti and punk pugilists. It does suffer from that usual scrolling beat-em-up issue that occurs to no one but seemingly me. Why don't they just drive to the boss's hideout? Why do they have to walk across the entire city to get there? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, the plotline, because these games do need them, otherwise you're just a violent shitbag strutting about town breaking teeth from gammy moorings, is thus: at least 15 women have been kidnapped by a mobster's criminal syndicate. Players are tasked with rescuing the captured women, and on the way clean up the streets from the mob boss's henchmen. So yeah, that's the plot line in your brain box there, and well, it's one that won't be pleasing literary historians and being talked of in 100 years' time. Characters are, they're a bit bland actually. Every player character is identical save for the different coloured jeans, hair and skin. This is definitely the pre-Final Fight era scrolling beat-em-up, where in that game of course you could select from 3 characters who were noticeably different from each other. But you know what? You should just be bloody happy to be playing to bloody game with 4 friends, lad. And be happy also that it's just bloody palette swap. It is something though that works better narratively with the brother storylines for Double Dragon and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as I'm pretty sure these bland double denim cops aren't related. This also means their moves are identical, and those moves are pretty limited. Your 2 buttons are punch and kick, and pressing punch and kick together makes you take to the air like a graceful, sparrow? Sparrow's graceful? Once lofted into the air with your own leg muscle action, you can deliver a flying kick. You can also perform a few grapples very occasionally when the game feels like letting you, including being able to knee a fella in his hoochie coochie groiny bits. Ooh yeah! You can also give them a good shoeing should they fall down like a bloody coward. Make the most of this move though, as it's very useful, because the hit detection is absolutely woeful in Crime Fighters. Sometimes you can hit an enemy in the chops, and sometimes you have to be slightly above them, but sometimes that doesn't work either. It's very inconsistent, and without doubt one of the game's biggest issues, and one that wasn't suffered by its same year stablemate Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Enemies are a mixed bag, with many mohawked maulers present as fist fodder, along with these 1950s time travellers Fonza-likes. The standard dominatrix, of course, is here. I don't know why they're in every single beat 'em up, but they do seem to be. Maybe dominatrixing doesn't pay that well, and they've had to turn to crime. And these meatheads as well, whose back muscles are possibly the most detailed graphics in the history of 2D beat 'em ups. Seriously, some graphic artist must have spent an entire week on this lumber region. The most annoying characters are the Kung Fu warriors who come along a little bit later in the game, who will deplete your health like no other, flipping around like Billy-O. Apart from this one dog, because he's even worse than them, who for some reason I couldn't knock out for millennia. Screw off, you pedigree chump. Some of these bosses may look familiar, with legally distinct Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger clones cropping up in the middle of the game, along with some familiar faces from the far superior sequel Vendetta, which you may remember from one of my early, much worse videos. The gameplay was way better in Vendetta. The fighting system was better developed in the sequel, with villains being much easier to hit and more interesting as well. Yes, even this guy is not really that right nowadays. And you can reenact your favourite Hulk Hogan and Mr. T team-ups from the A-Team series. It is a vastly superior game, and crucially, it doesn't outstay its welcome. Levels in Crime Fighters, they go on way too long, aided by this dodgy collision detection, and they aren't particularly interesting to wade through, guns or not. It's a cardinal sin for an arcade scrolling beat 'em up, in my opinion, to have levels that are too long, seeing as how simple the fighting mechanics are in these pre-Aliens vs Predator or Cadillacs and Dinosaurs era beat 'em ups. Although I do have to say that Final Fight had a few levels that were overly long as well, but that's different because that game's much better. So yes, I remembered this game as being a lot better than it is today, and with my nostalgia goggles set aside and put gently on the bedside table, I can say that Crime Fighters isn't very good at all. The only UK review I can find of Crime Fighters came from before the game had an official Western name even, with Computer and Video Games awarding it a 69% in their arcade action subsection. They said it was a challenge, and once you've got the hang of the controls, it's good fun and the gameplay above average. It's not exactly a glowing recommendation then. So there you are, Crime Fighters. It plays like a niggly, dull, overlong Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but completely shorn of its fun, pace or bombast. So play one of Konami's other efforts like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or Turtles in Time, or Simpsons, or X-Men, or just play Crime Fighter's very own sequel instead. It's one of my favourite beat 'em ups. Good old Vendetta, give it a go. Oh my god, is that poster actually alive? Okay, thanks, bye!